All right. Hello, everyone. It is Friday, August 6th. So your favorite duo is back and ready to talk about the world of sports this week. I'm Dylan Jesperson. With me, as always, Dylan Holt here on the Dylan and Dylan Radio Show. How are you doing this week?
You know, Dylan, I've been better. I I've been watching a lot of baseball of lately because with basketball coming out of season, we've got basically the Olympics in baseball going on. And my St. Louis Cardinals have not been doing well. They can't buy a win. Last night was a really tough loss against the Braves. It was kind of embarrassing, but that is what it is. And then also we're getting really close to football season, and fantasy football leagues are starting up. And I don't want to pay these fantasy football fees to get in these leagues because everybody's just trying to get it in my wallet, and I don't like it. It's a real downtime. We just got baseball and Olympics to focus on. That's what we're going to focus on, the good things, not worry about paying fantasy football fees and losing baseball games. We're going to talk about some fun stuff and not worry about all that. But how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm excited to get into this week of stuff. Inversely, the Tigers have been playing really well. They just took 2 out of 3 against the Red Sox, which was not what I expected to see when the Red Sox came into the town. But also excited for football season with preseason starting last night. It's just, you're getting into that mood. It feels like it's come quicker this year than any other year, and it's just getting me more and more excited as we get into it. Quick reminder to follow us on Television Sports Network, on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and then subscribe to the Dylan and Dylan Show on YouTube. That way you guys will never miss an episode. Speaking of football, we're about 3 weeks away from the start of college football, probably our favorite time of the year. And we thought this week's Out of the Box Fantasy Draft, we would get started and get into the college football mood by drafting our all-time Heisman winner team. The pretty straightforward. Anyone who won the Heisman is available to join your list. Snake draft per usual, and I'll throw it to Dylan. Do you want the first pick or the second and third picks this week?
I believe I got the first pick last week, so I'll let you have the first pick this week.
Okay. So with the first pick, I've got a pretty deep group of names. I did a lot of research on the guys, but first pick, I got to take the one that's been on my mind, and the one that comes to mind as a Michigan fan when you think about the Heisman Trophy. There's 3 names that probably come to mind, but for me, it's Charles Woodson, 1997, the only primary Heisman winner or to play the defensive side of the ball primarily, 43 tackles and 7 picks in his junior year, along with 11 catches, 231 yards and a touchdown. And obviously that punt return mirrored the Desmond Howard punt return against Ohio State. Went on to win a shared national championship with Nebraska that year in 1997. And that undefeated year might be the only reason he beat out your Peyton Manning and Tennessee that year, because Peyton Manning might have been the best player that year. But Charles Woodson, in terms of his versatility and then what he went on to do in the NFL, maybe my favorite Michigan player of all time. And born and raised in Ohio, then came and beat the crap out of Ohio State. So those types of players always hold a special place in my heart. So I'll put Charles Woodson on my board. I'll throw it to you for the second and third picks.
The Charles Woodson Heisman is a real sore subject for me and my family because I've always been taught that Peyton Manning is the greatest player of all time. It could be any sport. He's the greatest athlete. It doesn't matter. It's Peyton Manning. He's the whole shebang. So I've always been taught that was Peyton's Heisman. I mean, looking back, you can't say Woodson didn't deserve it, but it's hard to say Peyton didn't either. So that one's a sore subject. But I really like the pick. I'm going to switch lanes to my pick now, and I'm going to take a guy that I feel sure that you had on your list. I'm going to go with the guy that I think maybe had the greatest season ever in college football, in my opinion. He's a Detroit legend. The 1988 Heisman winner from Oklahoma State, Barry Sanders. I was doing research for this like you did, like you said, and I was blown away by Barry's numbers. Like I knew, obviously, Barry's awesome. Obviously was not alive to see him play at Oklahoma State. But the numbers, they just jump off my iPhone Notes app. 2,628 rushing yards, 37 rushing touchdowns. And then you throw in the fact that he's a kick returner as well. So he's got 3,249 total yards, 39 total touchdowns. He had more than 300 rushing yards in 4 games. That is silly. That major silly goose energy from Barry Sanders back in 1988. And then to top it all off in his final game at Oklahoma State in the Holiday Bowl, the 1988 Holiday Bowl. He ran for 222 yards and 5 touchdowns. That has to be maybe the greatest college football season ever by Barry. And that's why he became my first pick and why your Detroit Lions decided to pick him in the NFL draft. So, yeah, I'm going with Barry first. And then the second one, my second pick is probably the best college football season I've ever been able to witness. I'm going to throw it to 2010 from Auburn, Cam Newton. I remember this one very fondly because it's like getting around that age where you're like watching every game. It doesn't matter what team's on. And obviously, me being a Tennessee guy, I have a lot of eyes on the SEC. And Cam Newton down at Auburn, I have no problems with Auburn. Auburn can win every game they play if they're not playing Tennessee because they don't like Alabama just as much as us. But Cam tore it up at Auburn, throwing for 2,874 yards, 30 touchdowns, just 7 interceptions. That's silly. And then you look at his rushing stats. You've got 1,473 rushing yards with 20 touchdowns. 50 total touchdowns in the SEC when the SEC was not what it was today. Back in 2010, the SEC was defense country. That was more like the Big Ten is now, where they play quite a bit of defense. So those numbers really popped off the screen for me. I was like, yeah, let's get Cam along with Barry, and I think that's a pretty good start. So I'll take Cam and Barry and throw it to you for your next 2 picks.
Yeah, definitely great picks. You definitely swiped the Barry pick. He was lined up to be at least my 3rd pick, maybe my 2nd pick. I thought you were about to steal my 2nd and 3rd picks, but Cam was one of my alternate picks. I will go with the guy that I thought you were about to steal. I'm talking, when you say recent, I'm talking real recent. I'm talking 2019 LSU, Joe Burrow. Maybe not the athlete that a lot of the Heismans are, but the stats say it all. 4,715 passing yards, 48 touchdowns. That's just through the air. He had 289 yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground. Possibly the most dominant season individually and as a team, because LSU really did not get challenged in that season at all. Basically cruised to a national title, walked through the playoffs, and a lot of that, he had Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase as his wide receivers, so big part of it there. But Joe Burrow, probably the most dominant season in recent memory. I'll snatch him up. I'll grab him for my 2nd pick. And if we're going to skip over Barry, I'll go with a different running back, a different legendary running back in his own right. I'm talking the 1998 Texas team. I've got Ricky Williams on my squad. Maybe the greatest single season in college football history. He set 21 records, national records in 1998. And one of those, obviously, Tony Dorsett's all-time career rushing record that had stood for 22 years. He started his career as a fullback at Texas, which was one of the things that just it makes sense when you look at his body and his frame. But for a guy that rushed for 2,000 yards in the season, 27 touchdowns in that 1998 Heisman season, and I think at the time was the largest margin of victory when he won. Other guys have passed that since then, but one of possibly the single most dominant statistical season from a running back we've ever seen, and went on to have a very fascinating pro career, a very interesting 30 for 30 on him, if you want to check out his story. But as a college football player, I'm happy to have Ricky Williams on my squad. I'm happy with the 2 picks, Joe Burrow there and Ricky Williams. I'll throw it to Dylan for his final 2 picks.
I was really hoping Joe would be there for these last 2 picks. Joe is someone I definitely had, and I'm going to have to go to one of my alternates now. I did not have Ricky. I thought about Ricky. Ricky was an alternate I had down. So I guess for my 3rd pick, I'm going to stay with quarterbacks. I'm going to go down to the SEC down in Texas, 2012, Johnny Manziel out of Texas A&M. Everybody can remember that season. Johnny, he was a sophomore, I believe, at A&M, and just absolutely tore it up, throwing for 3,419 yards, 24 touchdowns, ran for 1,181 and 19 touchdowns. Just an electric season. It was by the midway point. I think it was the Alabama game, actually, that he had kind of wrapped it up. Alabama was on one of those dominant runs where it just seemed like no one could beat them. And then this kid from Texas A&M just torches them in Tuscaloosa. And there's that iconic play where he rolls out of the pocket, tosses it into the end zone just to a wide open receiver. And that was one of his real Heisman moments that no one will forget. And obviously the story didn't go as planned for Johnny, but that's okay. I'm very pleased to get him with my third pick. One of my favorite college players ever, up there with Cam. Barry would be if I would have been alive to watch him, I'm sure. With my final pick, I'm going to switch lanes back to running back. I'll bookend with running backs. I'm going to go 1981 at USC, Marcus Allen. Marcus Allen, one of the all-time greats. Unfortunately, like Barry, didn't get to watch Marcus with my eyes, but I've seen many highlights on the YouTube and on ESPN and such. Him, like Barry, when you see the numbers, it's like, holy cow, that guy, he was built different. He had 433 carries in 1981. That is absurd. If they did that now, they'd be like, are these coaches trying to kill Marcus Allen? What is going on here? He scored 22 touchdowns. He had 2,427 yards rushing. That is crazy. And then you go look at all-purpose yards, 2,683 total yards. That is just absolutely insane. He was the first person to ever run for 2,000 yards in NCAA history. Crazy season by Marcus Allen in 1981 at USC. And he's part of that elite running back history at USC with other great Heisman winners like Reggie Bush and O.J. Simpson. But yeah, I'm glad to end my Heisman team with Marcus Allen, joining Johnny Manziel, Cam Newton, and Barry Sanders. And I'll throw it to you for your last pick.
Yeah, great picks there as well. Marcus Allen, maybe an overlooked in terms of the USC running backs cores, but the stats don't lie. The stats don't lie in terms of Marcus Allen. So great picks there. With my final pick, I do have to go to an alternate because I was set on taking Barry with my third pick. But when you've got Heisman winners as your alternate, you can't really go wrong. I am going to go somewhat recent again. This was the last alternate I put on my list too. And then once I put it down, I was like, I was trying to figure out how to get him into the squad. And so if Barry's gone, I'll throw him in there. I'm going to go to the 2016 season, Lamar Jackson for Louisville. Maybe the most single dominant performances from a quarterback I've ever seen in terms of his versatility. Threw for 3,543 yards, 30 touchdowns, ran for 1,571 yards and 21 touchdowns on the ground. So he was one of those guys when he was playing, he just seemed like a created player in NCAA video games. You didn't think a guy could throw as well as he did, as well as run as fast as he did. Maybe the best athlete in college football in general that year, and he was playing quarterback. So dominant statistical seasons. That's kind of was my trend for most of it, other than Charles Woodson. Just some dominant seasons in terms of these guys, and I'm happy to round out my list. So I got Lamar, I've got Ricky, I've got Joe, and I've got my man Woodson. So pretty solid foursome. And looking, you had a group of alternates there. Anyone that didn't make your list that you were looking at?
So the guys that didn't make my list, the first one was Eddie George at Ohio State. I kind of like in live was picking in my head. I was like, I don't know if do I go with Eddie, do I go with Marcus Allen? I decided to go with Marcus Allen. Derrick Henry was another one. I absolutely love Derrick Henry. He's my boy. He's going to lead the Titans to a Super Bowl this year. But he's an Alabama guy. I take a little bit too much pride in my Vols to have an Alabama guy in my Heisman list. I'm sorry, Derek, if you're listening. We can go get lunch sometime and talk about it. It'll be okay. And then like Mariota, I had him on the list, and Jameis Winston, but I didn't put that. I thought these guys had better seasons all throughout, whether it be Cam or Johnny. Decided to go with them. What about you? What alternates did you have?
Yeah, so I obviously had to use one with Lamar, but I had guys like Bo Jackson written down. Bo Jackson might have been like the biggest name and could have helped in maybe the voting, but I looked at his season and it was he got hurt his senior year, so he played through injuries, and it was less than 2,000 yards, under 20 touchdowns. He's Bo Jackson, but maybe not in terms of the season, doesn't kind of rank up with these other guys. I had Cam on my alternates list. Obviously you took him. And then Desmond Howard was my only other one. Was before Devontae Smith obviously won it this year. He was the last wide receiver to win the award, which kind of seems wild that it was like 20 or so years in between, or 30 or so years in between. But caught 61 passes for 960 yards and 19 touchdowns in 1991, and second largest margin of victory ever. And then obviously the most iconic Heisman moment of all time, striking the pose after that punt return. So he was a last alternate, but got to show love to those Michigan guys. All right, be looking out on social media for those posts. We're going to try to find a poll this week that doesn't tie, as our last two ones have tied. We'll try to get the results for those, as well as get the polls up for you, so you can decide between me and Dylan who drafted the better Heisman winners. We will move forward now as the NBA refuses to go a week without big time things happening and giving us things to talk about. This week it was free agency that started, and while no big names like Kevin Durant or LeBron were on the market, we got our fair share of Woj bombs as guys either moved teams or signed extensions with their old teams. The Lakers are a bit more complete now. The Bulls made a ton of moves. The Knicks get Cardiac Kemba, so a ton to react to. Dylan, just give me your reaction to the NBA free agency period.
I think there maybe weren't the best players, like the elite players maybe weren't on the free agent market, but there were big names. It seemed like every 5 minutes, Woj was like, this big name's going here, this big name's going there, which was really fun to see because these guys have just created so much fame in the NBA because the NBA really they really encourage that, which is cool. Seeing guys that maybe aren't the best players, but they've got these huge fan bases and they've got this name value. The things that have stuck out to me are the moves that the Chicago Bulls have made and the Lakers, obviously. The Lakers have done huge things.
Yeah, so the Lakers definitely did a lot of big things, and the Bulls did a ton of big things in terms of their free agency. The Bulls were maybe the biggest surprise in terms of what they did, but the Lakers obviously filling out their roster.
Yeah, I was really surprised to see just kind of the bombs go down. It felt like we were kind of turning the clock back. It's like we're just talking about the Bulls and Lakers. I was like, is this the '90s, the late '80s? We're getting everything going. I really like seeing Lonzo take his talents to Chicago. It seems like that's been a rumor for years now, since he got to New Orleans in that trade for AD. It seems like they talked about him trying to get to Chicago. So it's cool to see that happen. And then they pair Lonzo and Levine and Vucevic with DeMar DeRozan. And that makes a really, really solid squad. And I think it was in the round table that I talked about how the East is kind of wide open. And it allowed a team like the Bulls just did to really make some moves and make themselves look like a real contender. We don't know what it's going to look like on the court. It could be a mess. Who knows? The Bulls haven't had the greatest luck in recent years, but we'll see. And I'm excited to see what happens because there are quite a few fun players between Lonzo, DeMar, Levine, Vucevic. They got Kobe White, and then Patrick Williams, the young gun down there. He's a lot of fun. Beyond the Bulls, the Lakers really stuck out to me because we're getting to the twilight of LeBron's career. So you want to see LeBron compete, and obviously the NBA it's a lot of times better when the Lakers are good. It's kind of like they're the empire that everybody wants to take down. When they're the bad guys and they lean into it, it's kind of fun. So going out and getting guys like Malik Monk and then getting Carmelo Anthony to team up with LeBron in year 19 is a ton of fun. And just filling out that roster because I think we also said last week, we're like, well, they've got 4 players. What are they going to do? And they really this week they're like, just wait and see. We're going to get people in LA to fill out this roster, and they really, really did that. And I wrote a note, which I think I might have been losing my mind. I said, are Chicago and LA the teams to beat? I don't know about that. I think Brooklyn and Milwaukee are still the teams in the East, but LA might rise back to prominence in the West. And then the other two things that I really highlighted were Iggy going back to Golden State today. I thought that was really cool. I hope he finishes his career there. He had such a good run. And he's a guy that could definitely get his jersey retired in the Bay, and he probably deserves it with all he's done. And then Kimba going to New York, you mentioned it. But the one of the most iconic moments in probably college basketball history is that buzzer beater he hit against Pittsburgh in the Big East tournament however many years ago, the cardiac Kimba moment in the Garden. So it's gonna be fun to watch Kemba in the Garden, no matter what it looks like. It'll just have that special feel to it. What have your thoughts been about NBA free agency thus far?
Yeah, you reminded me. I actually broke this out today when I remembered that we were doing this. I bought this after Kemba hit that shot in the Garden. I was like, all right, I got to get that UConn jersey. It's maybe one of my favorite pieces of sports memorabilia that I own. But you talked about it, the Bulls and the Lakers making their moves. Actually wasn't like a huge fan of what the Bulls did. I think, spending money makes fans happy. I think fans in Chicago are going to be happy that they're at least seems like they have a plan to compete. They're at least interested in going after guys like that. But I've also seen, like, when Detroit went out, and this is not comparable, these players are not comparable, but when Detroit went out and spent all that money on Ben Gordon and Charlie Villanueva in free agency, it was a move that just seemed to appease the fans. It was like, okay, we are competing. We can't get the big names though. And that was maybe, DeRozan was a big name, and Lonzo's a big name, but I just don't know how that team fits together. DeRozan's never really been a jump shooter. Lonzo's still trying to figure out how to figure out his jump shot. And Levine's a good shooter, but I don't think of Levine as a shooter. He's more of a guy that gets to the rim, can facilitate for his guys while playing off the ball really well too, because of his athleticism. So I think you need a little bit more shooting. So I think, a couple more roster moves would make that Bulls team a little bit better. So I think there may be a little wait and see. We'll see what happens before opening tip. And then the Lakers are, again, a wait and see. And it's weird because usually teams that are that big of a question mark, I feel like, are young teams. But this team just, we know what we're getting with these guys. It's just, how are they going to fit together? How does LeBron, Melo, and Westbrook fit together on a court? I just, not that it doesn't work and not that it can't work. I just don't know how it works right now. But I have to wait to see, what it looks like on the floor for me to really have like an opinion on what the Lakers are right now. They could be really, really good. I mean, if you told me 5 or 6 years ago that Melo, Westbrook, LeBron, and AD would make up the Lakers roster, I would have told you they'd win the championship, maybe go 74-8, whatever it is, because that's an amazing roster in terms of just the star power on it. I think lastly, I think the thing I'm most interested in is to see how Embiid and Drummond work together in Philly, because I know Drummond played off that beef a little bit that they had, but as a Pistons fan, I know that beef was like a little bit real. Every time they played, they were getting at each other, and Drummond's a little bit more passive than Embiid is, so maybe he thought it was a little bit less than it was, but I really think Embiid didn't like Andre Drummond when they played against each other. So I'm going to be really interested to see how they work now, because, back then the 76ers were still it was still an experiment. We didn't know how good they were going to be. We didn't know Embiid was going to be an MVP candidate, and Drummond was resurging that year when they really started having their beef. So now we really know, Embiid's an MVP candidate and Drummond's, not. So we're going to see how that really plays out in Philly. I don't know if that was the best signing, but it could work if they can work out through that, off the court stuff. Having Drummond to back up Embiid would be, almost ideal in terms of what he can bring in terms of rebounding off the bench. So interesting moves all around. I think, every move that I saw from Woj was like, okay, I can see why that makes sense. I can see why that team's making that move. We'll see how it plays out on the court. We will move forward again. It's NFL power ranking time. The NFL preseason got underway last night. So football season is officially right around the corner. Our power rankings this week get more interesting as we move towards the middle of the pack in the NFL. It is numbers 20 through 17 with our preseason power rankings. I'll throw it to Dylan to get us started with his 20th ranked team.
All right, number 20. I am going to go with a team that you had last week. I'm going to go to the NFC South, the black and gold, the New Orleans Saints. They're coming off a pretty good year, but they're also losing Drew Brees, and I think that's going to hurt them quite a bit. They don't really know what's going to happen in the quarterback room between Jameis and Taysom Hill. There's going to be, I feel like, a lot of turnover there. any way you want to look at it because it's not Drew Brees in there, like you said last week, and that's going to hurt them. And that's a tough division. They and without Drew Brees, it might not look great on the field. It's going to be a lot different for Sean Payton and those boys down there. But it'll be interesting to see if maybe they fix Jameis. I think that would be really neat, and that can make them a lot better than 20th. That's for sure. If they can get some good quarterback play out of Jameis or maybe even Taysom Hill. I haven't loved the Taysom Hill experiment, but who knows? They might change the NFL this year. That's why we watch and see what happens. But yeah, there's a lot of question marks without Drew Brees in New Orleans. So I'm going to put them at 20, and I like my decision. I feel better about the Saints at 20 than I did with Carolina at 21, which feels weird. But yeah, the Saints at 20. Who do you have at 20?
Yeah, and the Saints, I forgot to mention this last week. Michael Thomas decided to wait till June to get his ankle surgery, so now he's out for another 6 weeks. That's going to hurt a ton. I was already under the impression that Michael Thomas was going to have to adjust to Jameis or Taysom Hill over Drew Brees, and I thought that would be a tough adjustment. But to come back off ankle surgery 6 weeks into the season, that's going to be even tougher. So I'm happy with where we have the Saints. I will go at 20. I'm going to go with Minnesota, the third NFC North team. And all of these teams were kind of tough to rank as you get to the middle, and they're just past the middle. So they're obviously on the worst side of it. But I like Minnesota. I really like Justin Jefferson. He may be my favorite young player in the league right now. Maybe the best route runner and speed threats in a combo that you can have. But there's just only so much you can do with Kirk Cousins as your quarterback. The NFC North is weak. So even at 20, like that's second best in the NFC North for me. I have the Bears and the Lions finishing behind them, but it's just tough. Kirk Cousins can only take you so far, and I don't think he's going to take them very far this year. This might be bold, but okay. So with 17 games now, I think Justin Jefferson might have the first 2,000-yard season in NFL history, if Kirk Cousins can really put it together, because with 17 games now, he is so good at running routes and so good at beating guys that I think he is the guy that I would peg to have that first 2,000 receiving yards season. Calvin was the closest, I think, at like 1946 or something like that. He was really close. So I think with an extra game, give Justin Jefferson a full season, I think he could possibly do it. Maybe not this year, but at some point in his career. That's how much I like Justin Jefferson. So, but Minnesota at 20, I'll throw it back to you for 19.
I really like that pick at 20. So much that I'm going to put it at 19. I've got the Minnesota Vikings at 19 for a lot of the reasons you just said. I like Jefferson. I don't love Kirk Cousins because it's hard to fall in love with him because some weeks he looks like the second coming of the greatest quarterback ever, and then some weeks he looks like Kirk Cousins, which is fine. He's done a pretty okay job in his career. That's why he's making good money, and he's the starting quarterback of the Vikings. I think a big part for the Vikings is staying healthy. They haven't been able to do that in the last couple of years, which has hurt them. If they're able to stay healthy, they could be a lot better than 19. That's kind of the theme with these teams in the middle is if they can stay healthy, put everything together, they have a chance to be good. But there's question marks. Can they get the ball to Jefferson as much as they did last year? Because there's going to be more attention, undoubtedly. And that might open up things for Thielen. It might open up things for other guys. So it'll be interesting to see that. They have a very, very fun offense. But yeah, there's a lot of question marks if they can stay healthy. Kirk Cousins, that's the most important position on the field, and you don't know if he'll be able to be the guy on the big stage when they need him to beat Aaron Rodgers and the Packers when it matters, or beat whoever it is on any given Sunday. So yeah, the Vikings come in at number 19. Who do you have at 19?
Yeah, and I think similar theme for me within these middle groups. Can they stay healthy, and are quarterback question marks, and that usually is what puts them on the other side of the midpoint. And I have a team that you had last week at 21. I've got the Carolina Panthers for a lot of the same reasons. I do think, we talked about giving Sam Darnold that change of scenery, and I hope that makes a big difference in his career because I think he still has the arm talent to be really good. A real question mark is, can we get McCaffrey for a full season? And if we do, then we can really see how good this team could be, because I think Darnold could have a breakout season there, but McCaffrey has been hurt throughout his career. They really need him in there for that offense to work the way that it does. So question marks there. I hope Carolina proves me wrong, does better than that, because I think health is really the only thing that could hold them back. But it's tough to say what they will do. I'll put them at 19, and we'll see what happens there. Who do you have at 18?
At 18, I'm switching paces back to the AFC. I'm going to go to the AFC South. There are two AFC South teams that I have not mentioned on my rankings, and 18 is not my favorite team, the Tennessee Titans. So it is the Indianapolis Colts, which might be lower than a lot of people have. And I'm not really even taking into account the injuries to Carson Wentz and Quentin Nelson. I think the Colts really are about 18. A lot of people are really high on the Colts after trading for Carson Wentz. I don't see them being any better than they were last year. I think they're right around the middle of the pack. I don't know that Carson Wentz is an upgrade from Phillip Rivers, because there were games last year where Phillip Rivers looked awesome, and he really kept the Colts in games. I mean, he also had some Phillip Rivers moments where he took them out of games, but that's the Phillip Rivers experience that you learn to love if he's the quarterback of your team. They've got a very good defense. They can really run the ball when their offensive line's going. And if they have injuries, which Quentin Nelson's going to be out for a little while, Carson Wentz is going to be out for a little while, those could stack up and hurt them. But Jonathan Taylor's really good. The receiving core is not awesome. It's not terrible either. Their defense is going to keep them in games. It's the Colts. They're gonna stay in games. They're never really awful unless they're going all in for like the number one pick. So I see the Colts being very competitive. I think they're just really middle of the pack, even though a lot of people they're gunning for the Titans. I don't see it happening. I think they're right around number 18, in my opinion. Who do you have at 18?
Carson Wentz is such an interesting guy. He's almost following the way that I look at it. He's almost following RG3's career path to a T at this point. Breakout rookie season, looking like the next big thing, and then a leg injury just derails him, and now it just seems like he's never gonna come back to that same guy. So yeah, I have a lot of agreements there. I don't have the Colts yet, but I'm share your skepticism in the Colts. Share similar skepticism. Speaking of RG3, I've got his former team at 18, the Washington football team, and this one pained me. This is the one that really pained me to pick, because this defense is very scary. That front seven might be the best front seven for years to come, and might make me look stupid pretty quickly. And I love any team that allows Fitzmagic to take the reins and be the guy. But a lot of this has to do with the NFC East is pretty bad. So, that season last year was a little bit, tough to gauge in terms of what did they really do. And then the Cowboys, I expect to be really good. And I think they're going to be far away better than everyone else in that division. So that just puts Washington a bit down further. And they need a bit more on the offensive side to wow me a little bit more. Their defense, what they've done on defense is fun, and they could be scary good team down the road. But I think it's just a couple more off seasons of offensive, adding some offensive firepower to make that Washington team a little bit better. So I'll have Washington in at 18, and we will move on to our final teams this week at 17. Who do you got there?
At 17, I'm gonna echo you. I absolutely love the football team. They, like you said, that defense is going to be scary if they keep it together for years to come, which I hope they do. It looks like it's going to be a lot of fun in the nation's capital. The offense is a lot of question marks. I don't know why they didn't go out and draft a quarterback. That seems like such an easy thing to do, but I'm not a GM of the Washington football team. I can't remember the guy's name, but there's a reason he has the job. He's doing a very good job. They were in the playoffs last year. They were the closest team to beating the Buccaneers in the playoffs. That they won the Super Bowl, and they won it in convincing fashion. So they're doing something right. A lot of things are gonna fall on Fitzpatrick's shoulders, which is very exciting as a football fan, because it's hard not to root for him. And out of the NFC East teams, in my opinion, they're the easiest to root for. They kind of seem like underdogs. I don't know why, because it's such a great franchise. They have so much history, but they right now they just feel like underdogs.
Nope, I think we lost your audio for a sec there, but With 17, I like that pick as well. Obviously, Washington at 18 was great. So I love it. At 17, I am going to stay in the AFC as well. I've got the Miami Dolphins at 17. And as we get towards the middle of the pack, these picks are harder and harder. And I think Miami is a team on the rise. And if this is the year that Tua makes that jump, then this could look really dumb and Miami could be really, really good. But I still think Tua is just another year of growing pains away from being the best player in that division, the best quarterback in that division. So I think he'll show he'll flash what his true potential could be this year. I think we're going to see some like 300, 400 yard passing games from him this year, but the AFC East is also looking really good. New England retooled this year. Buffalo is on the rise. So, finishing third in that division is still pretty good. So that's where I expect Miami to be. So right at third, right around the middle of the pack at 17. So recapping, I have Minnesota at 20, Carolina Panthers at 19, Washington football team at 18, and the Miami Dolphins at 17. Dylan, just give us a quick recap of what you had.
So at 20, you got the New Orleans Saints, 19, the Minnesota Vikings, 18, the Indianapolis Colts, and 17, the Washington football team.
All right, good stuff. We will bring you the main middle of the pack next week, 16 through 13. Look out for on social media for those posts as well. We'll get you more of those power rankings out. That is going to do it for our main topics today. We move on to This Week in Sports, and we should almost call it These Weeks in Sports this week because we want to give our overall thoughts on what's been going on in the 2021 Tokyo Olympics. Lots of stuff we're watching and covering for the TV Sports website. You can check that out on tvsportsmag.com. We just wanted to touch base with each other and the listeners on what we've seen so far. So, Dylan, just give me your overall thoughts on the Olympic Games so far.
I absolutely have loved watching the Olympics. It makes me almost feel like a little kid because I don't really care what sport it is. I'm just rooting for the red, white, and blue. I want to see the guys and gals wearing the stars and stripes come away with the win and the gold medal. This morning, I was up real early for whatever reason. I don't know. Sometimes I just can't sleep in late because I'm becoming an old man, I guess. And I got to watch the Olympic freestyle wrestling. And I don't know if you've seen this, but there's been clips all over the internet of Gable Stevenson from the University of Minnesota. And he was down a couple, I don't know the exact terms, points. I'm sorry, wrestling community, if I'm getting this wrong. But he was down a couple points with just a few seconds left against the heavyweight from Great Britain. And he had a comeback and got 3 points again, if that's the wrong terminology. I'm very, very sorry to the wrestling community. And came back and won the gold medal. Stevenson's a guy that I've heard about because he's won several national championships in Minnesota. He's been dominant. He's an absolute character. He's a very, very funny guy. So it's very cool seeing him win that, bring the gold back home to America and Big Ten country, I reckon. I've really enjoyed watching Katie Ledecky swimming. She won 2 gold medals, 2 silver. She put on a absolute show like she always does. She's entering that realm of Olympian legendary, like Michael Phelps almost. She's so good. All the records she holds. I saw a tweet, I think it was last week, where the graphic of her records, it spanned it was upon 4 different picture tweets. So you just keep scrolling. There's just Katie Ledecky, Katie Ledecky, Katie Ledecky, Katie Ledecky. I was like, oh my goodness, she's just built different. She's like Michael Phelps, what he did. And she's already said she's going to come back for another Olympics, which is exciting. Get to see her do her thing. At the beginning of the Olympics, I really enjoyed watching the skateboarding. We talked about that a little bit. I wish Tony would have been out there, but it was cool to see. It was a new Olympic sport. Just getting to watch it and enjoy it. Didn't cover it, but just really enjoying it. Getting to watch some cool stuff. I've always enjoyed the X Games. Getting to watch them just go out there and have some fun, represent the country. And then the stuff that I've really covered and sunk my teeth in and learned a lot about was you got baseball, softball, women's basketball, men's basketball, and that's all been a blast watching the U.S. teams make it to the finals in almost all of those. We lost in softball to Japan, what was an awesome game. It was unfortunate. Then the women's team got their the women's basketball team clinched their spot in the gold medal game for the 7th straight time yesterday, which is crazy. Ties the streak the men's team went on from 1936 to 1968 of 7 straight gold medal games. So that was pretty cool. And then watching the men's team is obviously awesome. What have you thought about the Olympics so far?
Yeah, the Olympics. I echo everything you said. It's one of those times every so often. 4 years and now 5 years for this year. You get to everyone's on the same team. We're all rooting for the same team, and there's just I think what's so fun about the Olympics is that each of these sports, regardless how small and how big they are, they have their own storylines and they have their own, stars and people to watch. And even if you only get to sink your teeth in for about 5 minutes or so for some of these events, you get to learn all about, how these athletes have grown and, their expectations and the expectations of the Olympic people. And it's just awesome to see because it reminds you of growing up playing sports and doing things like that, because it's all very similar. I was able to cover the men's 4x100 meter relay qualifier, and you might have heard about that event because Carl Lewis ripped the USA team afterwards. And in doing research for the event, I learned a lot about it, and this is an event that the USA has dominated. 15 gold medals since 1912, 17 overall medals since it's been introduced. It was in 1912 that it's been introduced, but haven't won gold since 2000 and haven't medaled since 2004. And it's been all bad handoffs of the baton that have ended up costing them 2 disqualifications in dropped batons. And then this year, the baton handoff, the second baton handoff between 2 of the fastest men in the sport, just went so badly. It cost them so much time. They ended up finishing 6th in the heat, losing out to Italy, China, and Canada. And it's tough to see those types of things because the U.S. track and field is so dominant for what they do, win so many medals, win gold and basically, or at least medal in almost everything. And then to see an event that we dominated so historically become sort of our sore spot, that it kind of sucks, but it's interesting to see. Those are stories you don't really hear about very often, but it's interesting to watch to see how those things play out. I've also, it's just been, the storylines are my favorite part. And I think my favorite storyline was the Alaskan swimmer, Lydia Jacoby, winning gold. And then there's that video of her whole town watching in that small pool, watching her win gold and just going nuts. I think that was, the moments you live for in sports. And I think probably one of the best moments so far. It was like one of the first things that happened, and still one of my favorite moments of the Olympics. But yeah, watching the basketball team going nuts and figuring things out has been great. Both of those teams up for gold here coming up this week. So that's awesome. We're going to be watching a lot of Olympics as we go forward. We're going to look with our last This Week in Sports topic. We're just going to look forward to what we've got going on. What we're going to be watching. So Olympics, baseball, whatever is going on. Dylan, what is on your schedule and what are you watching for this weekend and the week coming up?
I reckon I've got about 4 or 5 things that are really on the docket this weekend. I can't wait to watch both the men's and women's basketball teams as they go for gold. I believe the men's game is tonight. I don't know for sure. It confuses me. I've got to admit, and if our boss Steven's listening, this has really tripped me up with the schedule. It'll say this game's on Thursday, but it's like midnight, and it's really tripped me up. I'll admit, the Olympics, the time change, it's tripped me up. But I believe that's tonight. It might be tomorrow. I'm excited to watch the men's game against France for the gold medal. And then the women play Japan, I believe, and I think that's tomorrow. I don't know. The time changes, it messes with my head. But I'm excited to see those. Excited to watch some summer league basketball. Watch the young Memphis Grizzlies and the other young guys around the league. The young Grizzlies team, I have a lot of fun watching them because Yves Pons from Tennessee is on there, and then they also have Shaq Buchanan, if I can speak, and Darnell Cowart from Murray State on the team, who both played with Ja at Murray State. So that's really cool to see. Watch those guys that I went to Murray State with play in the summer league. And then on this morning I secured some tickets to go watch the Cardinals play the Royals this Sunday. So I'm looking forward to that. Go watch, I believe John Lester is on the mound for the Cardinals. So get to watch geriatric John Lester on the mound on Sunday. So that'll be fun. But yeah, a lot of sports coming up. The Olympics come to a close on Sunday, I believe. So hopefully the U.S. can get a few more gold medals this weekend, and watch some baseball, watch some summer league basketball. Hopefully get some highlights in there, and yeah, just have some fun watching all the crazy things in sports. What are you looking forward to the most?
It's funny you say geriatric John Lester. I got to cover. He was on the Nationals, I think, before he got traded to the Cardinals, correct? And he was pitching a game that I was covering of the Nationals. I was like, geez, John Lester's still in the league. And then he got 2 hits, including a home run in the game. I was like, what's going on? John Lester just doing things at age 36 that I've never seen him do ever. Can't even throw to first base, but now he's hitting home runs. So interesting stuff there. Yeah, Team USA does play tonight at 10:30. Actually, probably the best time that they've played at in terms of us getting to watch it. So 10:30 Eastern time, not terribly late. I'll be tuning in for that. And as I said, as we jumped in, the Tigers are on a tear right now. Took 2 or 3 from Boston, won 3 of the last 4. And they start a series with Cleveland this weekend. And if they could win at least 2 of those games, I think they got to win at least 2. They might have to sweep it, but they could be in second place in the AL Central once the series is over. That's not saying much because we're still under 500, and the White Sox are like 9.5 games ahead of Cleveland at this point. But it's just something I'll be watching for. That young Tigers team is getting some confidence, and it's been fun to watch, even though they're not really competitive. In terms of the standings, they've been competitive with basically every team they've played this year. Swept Houston earlier in the year, just beat Boston, and now we've got Cleveland, Baltimore, and Cleveland back to back. So could be a few series to rack up some wins and actually get on the right side of 500. So we'll be watching for that, and then just watching the rest of the Olympics as everything lines up. I think the U.S. still has a pretty hefty medals lead, but last time I saw it was China had more gold medals than us. So we'll be watching that. The medal counts as everything gets wrapped up. That will do it from us. You have any final thoughts, Dylan, before we wrap it up here?
I just wanted to give a shout out to Spencer Dinwiddie. I'm sure Spencer's listening at home right now, or in the car, or wherever he listens from. His tweet yesterday, or your tweet, Mr. Dinwiddie, was one of the funniest things I've seen in a long time. He joined the Washington Wizards, and he tweeted out the clip from Harry Potter where Hagrid says, "You're a wizard, Harry." And I thought that was one of the funniest things ever. And I just, if you haven't seen it, go to Spencer's Twitter. It's very funny. Got a good chuckle out of me, and I just wanted to share that as we sign off today. But yeah, good stuff, Spencer.
Yeah, thank you, Spencer Dinwiddie. Hope you're listening and enjoy the shout out. All right, that is going to do it from us from the Dylan and Dylan Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. Reminder where you can find us. You can find our social media on Twitter and Instagram at Dylan Show, and now on YouTube at the Dylan and Dylan Show. You can find Tunnel Vision Sports on Instagram and Twitter at _TV Sports. Facebook and LinkedIn at Tunnel Vision Sports, and on the web at tvsportsmag.com. And that will do it. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening, and we will see you all next week. See you later.